Bernard Tobin here at the Innovative Farmers Association of Ontario annual meeting, joined now by Dr. Christine Nichols. She's a soil microbiologist, a long-time affiliation with the Rodale Institute, and now doing her own thing. Christine, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've just done a tremendous presentation here, really talking about, soil biology and regenerative systems. And you mentioned, it all starts with the fact that agriculture has a carbon problem. Tell us about that.
Well, I think that oftentimes in agriculture we focus so much on various types of issues that we see. We say that our growing seasons are too short, we don't have enough moisture, we don't have enough nutrients. But in reality, what we don't have is we don't have enough carbon in our soils, because our soils are full of a diverse web of soil organisms. And those organisms are all helping to get the soil to function and thrive in a way that's going to provide for the nutrients and the water and the open space in the soil for the roots to be able to grow into that soil and access the nutrients and water throughout the growing season.
Now, you talked about how obviously we've got some challenges here, whether it be weather, climate change. You talk about building resiliency. I hear it so much today in all our conversations and presentations. Why is it so important to build resilient soils?
Well, we want to have resilient soils. Again, the biology in the soil, there are millions of different species of organisms in the soil, and they all play different roles. And those roles, oftentimes you have a redundancy of function, meaning that two organisms could do the same type of activity, but one organism may do it under cold conditions, one organism may do it under dry conditions. And that way, no matter what happens, no matter what we're exposed to, because we can't control the weather, whatever it is that we're exposed to, our agroecosystems are still going to be able to thrive and still going to be able to produce highly nutritious, thriving food for us to be able to feed our growing population.
Now, you mentioned, talking about, how farmers can manage their soil better. And, the Olympics just ended. And you mentioned that, farmers really need to manage their soils like they're gold medal athletes. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we get so caught up in thinking about timing seeding and timing our inputs, timing adding fertilizer, and how much fertilizer do I need to apply and how much of this and how much of that. But if you really think about treating the soil like a living organism, like you would an athlete, trying to get that athlete to perform very well, which is what we want to get out of our soil. We want to make sure that that athlete has a good, well-balanced diet, is eating on a consistent basis, is eating a good, diverse diet, making sure that that athlete is doing physical activity, is making sure that that athlete is constantly challenged, not doing the same level of physical activity, but also is having various types of challenges, meaning that, the climate does change. And that is a good thing to a certain degree, because it is going to be challenging the plants that are going to be growing. We want to have them challenged by various types of insect populations. We want to have them challenged by a little bit of competition with other plants maybe moving into the system. All of those things can be really good because it helps the plant to become much more vigorous and much stronger, just like an athlete will be much stronger and be able to thrive in competition. And that's what we want to have in our soils.
Now, you put up on the screen today, and I've seen it twice today, and that is, the soil food web. And you mentioned, obviously how it interacts, but the point, it all starts with carbon. It all starts with those plants. It all starts with that biology. How important is that?
Well, it's a key to what's happening. I said that pretty much all life on planet Earth is carbon-based. Every cell in our bodies of organisms, every molecule, every enzyme that's produced is all that carbon it needs carbon as a backbone for those cells. And so you need to have an influx of carbon, and photosynthesis is the major way in which carbon, either directly or indirectly, gets into all life on planet Earth. And so we need to have this great influx of carbon. And sometimes, again, we focus on issues or challenges or, things that the food web is really kind of cool because it's all of these different organisms and it's a really cool, complex thing to look at. But sometimes we focus too much on that complexity and not on the simplicity of where it all starts.
And you also mentioned, farmers really almost like need to think about when they go to talk to their doctors and the advice that they get. And, the farmers should really need to treat soils like they would treat themselves. They need to be fed. They need to be considered and managed as living organisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the things that we do oftentimes do is, again, we don't treat the soil very well, and we don't think of the soil as a living thing. We think of the soil as a benchtop or just a media in which we can grow our plants in, but not that there's other organisms in the soil and not that it's going to be functioning as something. And so we want to make sure that we're giving that soil sort of a consistent diet throughout the growing season, making sure that we've got plants that are giving off exudates and feeding the organisms that are in the soil as much as possible. We utilize a lot of excuses, especially in the U.S. and in Canada and the further north that you go, where you have a shorter growing season, and say, well, it only is important if I just have a crop growing a couple of months or a couple of weeks out of the year. But in reality, that isn't what is important. If you were a plant, if you were an organism in the soil and the plant that was growing there, and it was only actually giving you carbon for a month or two out of the year. So if you have something like a short season crop, like a wheat crop, that is normally only putting carbon below ground for about 4 or 5 weeks. If you have something that's a longer season crop like corn or soybeans, that may be putting carbon below ground for about 2.5 months or so. But think about it. There's 52 weeks in the year. If you're looking at 4 to 5 weeks for a short season crop, or something that you're looking at maybe about, roughly about 12 weeks at most in, a longer season crop, that's a long time that you're starving. And that's what it is that we do to our soils. We need to make sure that it is that we're feeding our soils a consistent diet throughout the year, and we need to have a diverse diet. You need to make sure that we have, and that's what the diversity of the crop rotations or putting in diverse cover crops are a big part about as well.
Chris, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for stopping up to Canada, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Thank you so much for having me.